Hey, this is Jon Reed, Diginomica. I have successfully corralled Geoff Scott and Josh Greenbaum. If you want to talk about herding cats, you should see how this goes. How you doing, guys?
I've been waiting for our next podcast, John, for months. We were on a roll last year. We did 3 or 4 of them, right? Maybe 5, 7, 10.
Who's
some
counting?
number
They were great.
greater than 1.
They got better. They got better as we went along too.
And then we stopped. We abruptly stopped, Josh, and they just went right off the cliff. And now we're back.
Right. Well, I have this really wildly original idea, which is to tape something when we actually have something to say. I know that's crazy because a lot of people just want to do the pundit thing, but I like doing stuff when we have something to talk about. But I will point out this is our second podcast of the year, Geoff, because we did release a co-produced and co-recorded podcast from the ASUG Tech Connect on where the enterprise architects go from here. So if you haven't heard that one, that's the January podcast that came out. But yes, we are back and we'll tell you more about the next one because we're going to be taping a live one in Orlando if all goes as planned, which should be great. And you can join us and pester us with questions in the live audience for that. We are gathered here today, though, for different reasons because we have been provoked on a couple of topics. And I don't want to disappoint the AI fans, sycophants, and evangelists out there, but AI is not going to be the focus of today's podcast. However, we're going to talk about Business Data Cloud, which I would argue is sort of a prerequisite, like the data conversation has to happen first anyway. So we're going to talk about that a little bit because we've all been doing some interesting research on that. And then we're going to talk about business cases because there's some really interesting stuff going on right now in the community around why we need better SAP business cases and how to bridge that IT business gap. So that's on the agenda for today as well. So you ready to go, guys? Ready to rock and roll?
I'm ready. I wrote down on a sticky here, John, 2 words, sycophants and evangelists. I'm going to use these in my words today.
Excellent. So on the Business Data Cloud, this was part of the SAP Unleashed announcement. Geoff, you were there in person. This happened a little more than a month ago. And that wasn't the only thing that was announced that day, but I think it's fair to say that was sort of the highlight. It's an ambitious product. It's an ambitious announcement on SAP's part, and we've dissected it in a lot of different ways. I've now written 2 mammoth articles on that, which you both contributed to the most recent one. And Geoff, through ASUG, you've done a series of really interesting ASUG talks, podcasts on that, including one with Irfan Khan, who is sort of the one of the big drivers behind all of this. And if you talk about data at SAP, you're going to run into Irfan in the hallway pretty quick, right? So because we've covered this topic from so many angles already, we're not going to go deep into this, and we're going to assume there's some basic knowledge about this announcement at this point. And if not, check out some of the other resources we mentioned. But I just want to tee you guys up a little bit on this and just say, give me something from your research and talking with customers and community members. What's jumping out at you that's something you've learned so far that you want to sort of share with listeners about this announcement and what it means?
I'll go. I'll take that. I mean, and this is something we talked about. It was in the piece that you wrote where you quoted me. But I think the thing I don't know the answer to, but I'm working on is how does this all fit into the context of SAP's plans for Business Network and for building out a very strong and capable community of buyers and suppliers around the Ariba products and enabling them to be more successful, because that's a data play too. That's a process play. Inside this announcement is both obviously the BDC data story as well as the Insight apps. And as I said, there's some overlap between what's going on in IBP and planning, what's going on in Taulia with cash management and working capital management. And I'm really interested in what that means to this concept of building a stronger networked economy, because I think more than ever, I'm talking to customers who really want logistics, supply chain, and planning solutions to be as strong as hell, because it's complicated out there right now.
And Josh, you gave me some content and posted a longer version on LinkedIn around some preliminary findings you have around some of the licensing questions around some of that in terms of like if you've already invested in working capital management from Talia or supply chain planning through IBP or whatever it is. So you have some tentative answers there, but I guess a lot of that is still getting sorted.
Yeah, and I think, the bottom line is, if you are already a DataSphere or SAP Analytics Cloud customer, a lot of stuff is going to transfer. We don't know the details. That's the other problem. What moves at what pace and what way over from these older environments to BDC is a big question. But I think the thing I was really looking into was the problem of I bought Taulia because I needed the ultimate working capital management solution. I bought IBP because I need the ultimate business planning solution. And now it is very clear that some of that functionality is going to be coming out as inside apps, essentially analytics from BDC. And if you want the ultimate and the best from SAP, you're going to have to get involved with BDC as well. That may not sit well with customers who thought they had one solution that they were going to grow with. Geoff, you're looking skyward on that one.
No, I'm listening to your commentary, and I'm thinking about it and letting it kind of filter through and absorb. One of the things that I think that could potentially be a very interesting opportunity for customers who adopt BDC is it could be your platform for AI. One of the riddles that hasn't been clear in my head is if you're going to do AI and unleash agentic AI or generative AI bots or LLMs, whatever, where does that data come from? And originally my thought process was, well, you'd have to make sure your SAP public or private cloud ERP is appropriately structured for this, right? Because I thought, well, that's where it's going to go looking for that data. And then I kind of listened to the BDC announcement. I was like, okay, wait a minute here. Actually, BDC may ultimately be that layer of functionality that is where your AI engine derives its inferences from. And what is interesting to me about that is it means that maybe there's a little pressure relieved on a couple of things that I think were problematic for me, and that was master data and archiving, in the sense that if you had a lot of stuff in your SAP environment, you really didn't need to be part of AI. And if you let the AI, agents run wild, it may come back with potentially biased answers or wrong answers. And so if BDC can be that layer that allows me to filter through and present to AI agents a more succinct view of the world, because I can take all of this and I can bring it together and I've got the right, topology of data and all those things, that there might be some real value to that. Now, I have a couple of questions. What version of SAP do you need to be running in order to make that work, right? How far away are the average customer from being able to get there? So I think that to me is an aha moment. And of course, I think if we as customers can exit the very laborious part of this, which is managing ETL jobs and getting data into data lakes in its right structures and with its right meaning and all the other data that has to go around it to make the data correct, I think that's got huge value as well.
So I'm glad you hit on that, Geoff, because one of the things I said in my blog post is that I think so far SAP's done a pretty good job of answering the question, why SAP Business Data Cloud, like why can this help? And it gets back to, I think, what you just said, which is we're going to help you solve some pretty intractable data problems that haven't been solved before. Where I think SAP still has some challenges is making the case why SAP Business Data Cloud over other third-party best-of-breed options, both in analytics and AI. And I think that's a tougher question to answer and one that customers are going to look very hard at. And so when you peel back the questions, I think we have a few different categories of questions, because one are things around licenses and compatibility and all those things are going to get played out over time. Probably we'll learn a lot in Orlando at the ASUG Annual Conference and Sapphire, et cetera. Then there's this kind of this cost benefit thing that's going to have to get played out. But I think the really interesting thing is around what this looks like versus those third parties I was talking about, because what you're hearing a lot right now from SAP around this is things like zero copy data around Databricks. You're hearing about semantically rich data. And basically what what SAP's trying to do there is say that, yeah, you can try this stuff with third parties, but we're going to give you a lot better, richer analytics and a lot better AI because of all the semantic relationships that are contained in this data that we are able to provide you. And the significant thing about that is SAP's talking about combining structured, unstructured, and non-SAP data into that mix. If SAP can do that, that's very interesting, and it will be something to watch because, like I said in my article, like one of the underestimated things here that people don't appreciate is that generative AI and LLMs aren't that good with structured, tabular, transactional data formats. And SAP's been working hard on that through their so-called knowledge graph pursuits and their foundation model. Where that adds up to, we're going to find out. But I think that's really interesting for SAP to take on the challenge of saying, you're going to get better analytics through us because of all of that. Now, let's find out, right? Like, because if you don't, then there's a hell of a lot of third parties that have some pretty slick sounding solutions out there that customers are going to also look at. So,
John, I think you're spot on. And the two words that you use that I think are really operative here as well is the first word, which is what, which to me means I think every customer should be watching this space from SAP very closely over the next 6 to 9 to 12 months to ask very important questions about, is the promise and the reality in sync? And if it is it worth it for me to make that jump? And that's the first thing I'm interested in, right? Are the words and the actions lining up, right? So can I actually do the things that have been described in the SAP Unleashed, presentations that they've been doing around the world? And then the second thing that you said is cost benefit. And that to me is also incredibly important, being that today I'm spending X for this. Do I get a greater than X benefit if I switch to this platform? These are complicated things. Running your analytics layer over the last decade is a complex exercise. It's got a lot of people involved in it, a lot of technology involved in it. How quickly and seamlessly can you pull those layers out and re-bring them back together again? And if this is really something that I can bring in and get rid of complexity at some cost, I think this makes a ton of sense. If all it does is get rid of some complexity and add a lot more cost, I think a lot of customers are going to say, thanks, but I got a million other things to do.
So let me ask you. Oh, sorry, Josh. Go ahead.
I just want to add to that because I want to position this conversation about costs in my own personal way, which is that I'm not that, on the record, I'm not a big fanboy of Gen AI solutions right now. I think they're solving 50-cent problems. I'm more interested in how do you solve $1 million problems. And that's where the examples I just gave when I started, IBP, Taulia, Business Network, these are AI-based functions, absolutely old school, but good old, predictive algorithmic AI that solve $1 million problems and do a hell of a job and actually do it in a pretty competitive way relative to other options, particularly if you stage them on top of a BDC kind of environment where now you really have the more complete data you have for any of these kind of applications, the better. And so I think that if I were looking for cost benefit analysis, I would be parking the Gen AI stuff in a corner and say, that's cool. That's down the road. We need to get started now for whatever reason. But I've got immediate requirements today in my business planning, in my working capital management, in my supplier network, whatever, that this data will have a tremendous, benefit for, and I can get that pretty quickly out of it.
So I think the real point around investing in something like Business Data Cloud or similar technologies is that it feeds all of the use cases, right? So regardless of whether, people disagree with your Gen AI take or not, like it's going to feed all your analytics cases. It's going to feed your machine learning cases. It's going to feed all of that stuff.
Yep.
But
I'm just being ornery.
No, and no, absolutely. And I think, we've had some AI debates before around what SAP is doing there, and we'll get back to those, I'm sure, in future episodes. But for now, I did want to run one thing by you that Irfan Khan said to me, because I use these phrases like semantically rich and zero copy are being used. And I think I really want to drill into them a little bit because I want folks to think about what this actually means and where the value might reside. So let me read you this quote from Irfan, guys, and then you tell me what you think of it. So so we got into this sort of value proposition of what makes Business Data Cloud arguably superior in SAP's mind from an AI context. And Irfan talks about the finance domain in ERP, and if he takes the raw extracts of the accounts receivable data and bursts that out and puts it in some kind of model training environment, then I have to go through the painstaking process of having to reinstate what is an accounts receivable record, who is a supplier, who is the client. I'm already wasting time. So that's sort of the criticism of what that looks like when a third party is going to come in and extract that data. And obviously SAP has a lot of self-interest in putting it that way, but I think that's a fairly accurate description of some of the challenges. So then Khan goes on to say, if you can inherently create a contextual value of the data that's being shared in a zero copy format of these, let's call them primary data products that are already semantically enriched, I'm going to combine those products. Take a total workforce planning example. I've got headcount sitting inside of HR. My financial plan is in finance. If I can bring those data products from those two environments together, I can look at it from a total workforce planning perspective, combining finance and headcount data, and then I share that semantic rich data with a zero copy share format, and machine learning can be conducted on top of that. That's a fundamentally huge differentiation. And notice, Josh, he did not say generative AI, so you don't have to worry about that. He said machine learning, which fits into a lot of your old school scenarios. So what do you think? Is that a good case that Irfan is making there?
Personally, I don't think it's differentiating. That's the
Mhm.
problem, because that's not all about exclusively SAP data by definition. The
It's- it's-
value, yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Josh. Finish.
No, just the potential value is that you're going to, you want the greatest, variety of data. You want the greatest complexity of data in these complex end-to-end processes and those semantics that go with it. And that means non-SAP and SAP data. So,
Right, but this announcement covers that. It
Right.
didn't in
Yeah,
that quote, but so expand that a little further and assume that he was including non-SAP data sources in that quote, because that he was emphasizing that as part of the features there. So what do you think?
Go, Geoff.
Well, to me, it sounds really compelling. However, how much customization have I done along the way to model my business processes, which might be slightly different than SAP's, into these systems of record, whether they be success factors or, Josh, to your point, IBP, or my mainline ERP. And if I've done those customizations, have I done them in such a way that this BDC layer will be able to do its work with them, or will it be kind of, working against the BDC layer? And if the answer is it's the latter, then, I've created hurdles to adopt this. So what I think about is speed to adoption as we move down the road is going to become increasingly more important. And so to the level that customers are customizing their legacy ERP applications to fit their business processes around it, they could potentially be on the sidelines when it comes to adopting these innovations. And so when we think about all of this, we come back to the general, I think, principle that the customers who will be able to succeed the fastest with all this innovation are the ones who have implemented and done the least amount of customization possible, which doesn't sound like a tremendous number of SAP customers. So where do we find this value? And one of the things we've been saying in all of our chapter engagements and chapter meetings over the last quarter of this year is this notion that moving to SaaS-based public cloud solutions has to be a North Star for many customers. Now, we also recognize from an ASUG perspective that is a tremendous, tremendous journey that they're on, because without that, they won't be able to adopt these innovations at size and scale, which brings me back to kind of why I think, John, your point and the word you used is watch is so important, because let's watch how this unfolds and how many customers can really do this on day one versus having to do massive projects to line this up. And then the question becomes, if I do that massive project, is the cost of that project worth the return I get back?
By the way, Geoff, your SaaS public cloud tough love speech for customers never gets old to me, because that's totally provocative stuff. And I don't hear it enough. So I was
but it is
hearing
provocative. It is provocative. And, but I also recognize that that's not the world that most customers came from, because 20 years ago, 10 years ago, they were told,
Right.
Make this what you need it to do for your business.
And look, it's not one size fits all. It doesn't fit in every industry and every situation, but it provokes the right discussion, which is why I'm glad you bring it up like that. So let's just do a quick lightning round and wrap up BDC because I want to get to business case. I just want to hit real quick on any burning questions you're going to be taking on this topic into the ASUG conference in Sapphire. I'll tell you mine just to get the ball rolling, which gets to your speed to value comment, Geoff. The one thing I get concerned about with SAP and with data products in general is these overly ambitious projects, because I don't think anyone has the appetite for 3-year data cleansing and data platform initiatives. And so there's got to be a bunch of milestones along the way where we're hitting points of significant value. And those will be the things I want to see SAP articulate a little more clearly in the context of BDC. One possible scenario, and this is where partners could get involved creatively as well, is this sort of loosely defined idea of the insight apps, but building insightful applications, if you will, whether they're AI or analytics or not. I'm going to be looking for things like that help customers to pinpoint the areas where they have good data and build a great app and get some momentum. Because if you don't have that, then in my mind, this kind of ambitious project is going to be sitting on the shelf somewhere.
Spot on. I agree with you. My lightning round is SAP in Orlando. We need the next level or two of detail to understand whether the vision actually makes it through the implementation layer. And when that happens, I'm curious to have a lot of customer conversations to see, do you see the light in this? Do you see value here? Or do you still have a big question mark above your head about how you'd actually make this work?
And I'm going to sort of wrap all those comments together and say, I want to see how, what does the project side of this look like? If you look at just general migration, upgrade projects, data is the third rail. It's the classic place where things fail if not for other reasons. So we're already stepping into, potential minefield. And you could spend a lifetime trying to fix some of these data sources. And yeah, what you just said, Geoff, and what's my value? That's a big one.
And Josh, to your point on the third rail, if I knew then what I know today, would I have made different decisions? And I think that's potentially an area where customers might get a little feisty, because BDC wasn't really, for a lot of reasons, right? I mean, we just weren't there, wasn't on the roadmap when many of them began their S4 transformation projects. And now all of a sudden it's like, wait, what? I wish I'd known that a couple of years ago. I might have made different decisions. But I could make the same argument, well, if that's the case, why are we still madly implementing private cloud when we really should be thinking about a public cloud destination?
To be continued.
Yes.
At a bar stool near you.
Wow.
Please find us, pull us aside, and continue this discussion.
The Orlando party invitations are already starting to roll out. That's how you know we're close.
Indeed. So I want to get right into the business case discussion. And Josh, you're going to get teed up to basically introduce us in a sec, so get ready. So basically, this is kind of an organic thing that came out of conversations that all of us had, Geoff, mostly at ASUG events, where we spoke with members about a lot of the challenges they were facing. And we started to create this sort of umbrella concept around this notion of the business case as one way of framing the feedback we were getting. And so that's really culminated into not only just a dialogue that we were having now, but one that we really want to invite listeners to participate in with us and give us feedback on, and that we're going to do some structured stuff on at the annual conference. We'll tell you more about that later. But Josh, can you just describe a little bit to me, like some of the raw feedback we were getting that started to spark like this idea?
Yeah, and it's there's a lot of it, to be very honest. And it comes from, a lot of different areas, but the fundamental, and it's interesting because I just presented last week at the Cloud ALM Summit on this, on this topic. And one of the things I did, because I'm talking to a technical audience, is say, let me tell you what I'm hearing. So I'll just read you. I just threw 5 quotes in front of them that were real quotes from real conversations. Quote number 1, I can't get my users away from the ECC screens because I don't have a business case to give them. That was a real revelation. I'm not going to, you both have heard me give that example so many times, I'm going to move on quickly, but it was a theme that was repeated A lot of them, another one that I found really interesting, also from Tech Connect, was, quote, we're completely overwhelmed. It's hard to get the money to do anything. That quote prompted a question to me to say, well, why can't you? And the answer is, we need to get the counterparts on the business side to move forward, and we're struggling with that. We're struggling with the message. They are happy with what they have. They don't see the pain points immediately. I need to get in front of the right people, but I don't have the data. And I think that's a summary of a number of conversations in about 5 sentences that really struck me as we need to help. We, meaning those, we, the community, need to help each other to make these business cases and to draw the business side into the conversation. And I think one of the problems is the story about clean core has given the false impression that you don't innovate at the core. And when you don't innovate at the core, the line of business who really knows SAP as a core company more than anything else says, well, okay, I'm looking for innovation on the edge. I've got a whole bunch of best of breed folks to talk to. They're knocking at my door all day long. And so they get distracted by this wrong impression of what clean core gives them. And IT is now fighting a two-front war, trying to get budget to do the upgrade, the technical side, and losing the battle for the business side because they can't get the attention of the business.
So, Geoff, I want to get to you in a sec, but I want to frame up a couple of things for our listeners here, which I think is interesting. One is that part of the challenge here, I think, is that things are moving so fast now that a collection of static resources on an SAP website that can kind of help you think through this aren't going to be enough. And yes, SAP even does have some value engineering type programs and such, but you have to be at a certain stage in your evolution of a project in order to seek that kind of thing out. And what we're finding is I think a more universal sort of issue around these topics. And it's, for some, it might be something resembling a more classic in-depth business case, but for a lot, I think what they're referring to is sort of an IT business gap. And how do I bridge that? And what's fascinating about that is this even pertains to really hands-on folks like enterprise architects now. And to some degree, I think that's a positive change in how IT people are functioning inside of organizations, because they're really taking to heart that they need to demonstrate business value. But I would also say the pressure is on here because with these end of maintenance deadlines looming for a lot of customers, I think there's a real risk that they're going to undertake a technical migration scenario and then really get caught holding the bag with not being able to really justify the investment made in a way that's compelling. And so that's a lot of what's on my mind. But Geoff, what have you heard? I know you've even heard from some board members on this topic. So what kind of feedback are you getting and how do you make sense of this so far?
Yeah, I think that the more it's just about the business case, the harder it is to make that justification, right? It means that the business isn't ready to really grapple with it. I think there's a lot, and I'm an accountant, right? So I grew up with business cases. There's a lot of intangibles here. And so to your point, Jon, I asked a number of board members. One is being asked to create a business case, which means the business, and it's interesting, he's not driving it. The business is starting to ask, so they're curious about it, right? What might this mean? I had another one that I asked. I said, when you did your S4 project, did you have to do a business case? And he said, no, not really. We kind of came to the conclusion we were running multiple ERPs. We'd gone through M&A. The world we were living in was untenable, and we needed to make a change, right? It's like, hey, do I need to write a business case to replace a roof? Well, your business case is the roof is leaking. And we can watch the roof leak on top of all of our product and create damage, or we can just get the roof repaired. I know that's a very contrite example. But I think in many ways, maybe one of the things that the IT team needs to do is have a more impassioned, passionate argument about why modernizing this technology ecosystem is important. I think about the political landscape and that we live in right now, and we're right in the middle of the throes of tariffs as we record this today, right? How many of us knew that the tariff things were going to be a big deal when we started our SAP implementations, right? The more we modernize, the more likely we are going to be able to respond to real world, disruptions in our businesses. We talked about this during COVID, right? that supply chains were holistically unprepared to deal with COVID issues. And we've made these, improvements along the way. I think this is like, why are all of us not running our iPhones until they literally stop working? Like, why are we upgrading our iPhones every couple of years? Why not just wait until literally you cannot run it because the battery is so dead that it only lasts for 5 minutes? But we don't. We've been conditioned to replacing our technology because the technology gets better every single time. Yet when it comes to our SAP implementations, we seem to think that a 30-year useful life is good. It'd be like, you and I sitting around saying, hey, you know what? Let's write our next set of modifications. Let's just do everything that we need to write in COBOL. That's good enough, right? I said a lot there. None of it is remotely helpful.
Can I respond to that just quickly? Because there was a really interesting question that came up in the after I did this talk. There was
you're not gonna attack me, are you, Josh?
No. I'm gonna back you up 100%. Trust me.
I can't handle an attack today.
Yeah, so there was an Ask Anything question session, and one of the questions came up. And this Cloud ALM Summit was a mix of old school solution manager, ECC. What can I say? I was going to use the word biggest but that's really unfair. Just so deeply entrenched in that they don't know how to see their way out of it. And new people new to Cloud ALM who want to get moving. And this question came from the audience, and it was really why do I have to use all this business process stuff like Signavio and Lean IX? I just want to run Cloud ALM. I just want to stand up my cloud instance and run it. And my answer to that was very simple. Yeah, when you started with Solution Manager, the whole goal was to stand up an instance and God forbid you touch it ever again. And in fact, that's one of the reasons we're in this disasters. These, people didn't upgrade their systems. They didn't. You were set in stone, literally set in stone. That's not how you run a business today. And, one of the things I was saying is that, when you look at how do you do modern business process management in a Cloud ALM or cloud environment, you have three things you're monitoring simultaneously when you look at a process. You're monitoring, did I stage the process correctly in the first place? Did I get it right? If it's tariff, relief or something, did I understand the problem on day one and build a great process? The second thing you're monitoring is that process being used correctly? Is there user error? When I see red in my KPI, is that because somebody screwed up? Or third reason, has the business changed enough that now I need to modernize the process? And that third option is now coming at us, to your point, Geoff, faster and faster. So we want to live in the cloud because we want to get it right the first time, but we also want to get it right the second time. The second time is coming long before we ever anticipated it in a solution manager world.
So Josh jumped ahead a little bit in a good way in terms of some of the quote unquote solutions and resources to these problems. And I want to get to that in just a sec, because I think part of why we're interested in this topic is we think there's a whole lot out there for customers that they're simply not taking full advantage of. And the so-called transformation as a service tool set that SAP promised when RISE was announced is starting to materialize a little bit in Josh's view, and that's an interesting part of this topic. I wanted to mention briefly that, Geoff, you keep raising your hand.
I'm going to come at this with my CEO hat on, and I'm going to ask a couple things. I know as the CEO of ASUG, sometimes I ask for business cases, and I'm going to ask for business cases for two reasons. Number one, I don't know what you're talking about, and I'm stalling for time so I can, right? And I do think that there's a certain amount of, if you really want this bad enough, I'm going to tell you no, I'm going to tell you no, I'm going to tell you no, and then maybe on the third or fourth try, I'll give you a yes. So are you going to have the tenacity to keep coming to me and saying, hey, Geoff, we need to do this, and here's why, right? So business case, one reason is, hey, I'm just not exactly sure I understand what you think is going on here. And I'm going to make you kind of demonstrate to me that you have personal investment in this, right? So if an IT person were to come to me and say, I think we should do an S4 upgrade and it's going to cost $5 million and we should do it tomorrow, that's not going to move me as a CEO. If someone comes to me and says, "Hey, Geoff, we're going to need to spend $5 million to do an S4 upgrade. Here's the things we're going to get for it," that starts the conversation. The second reason why I might ask for a business case is I want to ensure the discipline is in place to make sure that the spend is well researched, that we know what we're doing, we understand the return that's involved. And even if the return is upside down, I might accept that business case because it looks like you've done your homework and you've been able to demonstrate to me that you've got this right. Right. So I'm going to use it as a way to say, hey, I don't need you saying, hey, we're going to spend $1 million on an S4 upgrade. And I turn around and 3 years later, it's 5 million. That's not a good discipline. So demonstrate to me you've done your homework, you've dotted your I's, you crossed your T's, and I know what we're in for, and I'll probably green light it. There's so much of what I look for as a CEO are the people who are driving this passionate enough about it that they're going to put their reputations and their personal brand on the line to deliver that business outcome. If they bring that to me because they believe, you got me. I'll probably green light it.
And the problem I'm seeing, Geoff, is that a lot of folks that we talked with so far, I think they had the passion, but they didn't necessarily have the clear sense of what the business results were going to look like. And so just for the community and those listening, we're really using business case in sort of an umbrella term because I could see this being used for people, an enterprise architect that wants to talk to their business colleagues in a better way about why their SAP product is going to help them and make a difference in their lives. Or
Right.
it could be that you need to go in front of the board, but you need to tell a better story, and you need a more visual narrative, and you need to be able to tell the story of your project in a more effective way. Or it could be that you need to really justify the business benefits of an S/4HANA migration, and that's where the real pressure cooker point is for SAP right now. So we're kind of looking to the community to help us define the different ways that you want us to take this conversation forward.
Or John,
Yep.
I really don't want to do this.
Yep.
I'm a couple of years away from retirement, and this is a headache I don't want. So while I think we should do this, I have no personal stake in it.
Yep.
And I'm going to give you kind of a, hey, we should do this upgrade line. But I'm as people in the room are watching my body language, I'm not communicating that this is something we should do.
I think you guys hit on a really important point because you need this kind of stuff for almost any kind of project right now. Cloud projects as well are under a lot of scrutiny for not being as cost effective as they were originally, dreamed up and planned. So no matter what you undertake, I had a conversation with a vendor earlier today that was talking about competing against some of the big ERP shops by specializing in areas that are more impactful right now for customers, like things like field service and asset control and maintenance, which are like really big pain points. So that's fine. But this idea that the ERP is a back office is a really big misconception that's driving a lot of the problems we have right now around this topic. Because just for example, in the last couple of years, some of the most interesting ERP use cases I've documented, and this is not just SAP, but across the board, even in mid-market, when I ask customers, how does this help you? This notion of agility is really important. And I know it's a stupid, ridiculous buzzword. I get that. But talking to companies who say, now that we're on this new ERP system, we can now go after acquisition targets that we couldn't before because we couldn't roll them up into our company fast enough before. And now we can. And now we can put them all on a standard platform. Do you think that's not a freaking business case? That's an absolute core ERP business case to be able to roll that stuff out quickly and operationalize new businesses. So why aren't the typical people that we talk with able to have those conversations? They need help and they need resources and they need to have more of a dialogue. And I think we need to start bridging this gap so that they can be more effective and get these projects to be more well-rounded. So it's not just a technical, we're doing a technical migration to S/4HANA, but we're the business leaders aren't bought in. Why not? Did you tell them that they could go out and acquire companies 5 times faster? Did you tell them that they have access to this cloud ALM tool set that's going to allow them to pinpoint their process issues and fix them? Did you explain any of this stuff?
There's the passion. Bring that to me.
This is what we need to be talking about, I think, right now.
So
anyway,
yeah.
go on.
No, and this is one of the things I'm really interested in, again, from a sort of a methodology standpoint, is we have to sort of break down some of the barriers that are built into how we approach projects. And a good example, and SAP has Activate as a methodology. And again, one of the things we're trying to do in the cloud is, of course, standardize processes as much as possible. Take advantage of what's already built in, that's best practice, so that we're not reinventing the wheel every time we implement something. And in the Activate methodology, there's a fit to standard process that starts. It's phase 2. And the point I was making, and it's interesting because I ran into Jan Muzo, who's sort of the owner of Activate, and we discussed this. The point I was making to the audience, which got a lot of pushback in a good way, was if you're starting fit to standard as a phase 2 in implementation, you've already signed a contract, you're already going down the road, and now you've brought your business users in and you're trying to get them to think about standardization versus customization. You've missed the boat. It's a phase 0 conversation with your business users. And if you're not doing that, that's the homework I think Geoff is talking about. If you're not doing that homework, then you're gonna end, why bother in a way with the whole thing? Because you want them as allies, you want them as excited and as passionate as IT is about this. And the thing I keep telling about business case development, which maybe bears saying here now, is one of the things IT gets to do is to sell and deliver trust. Trust in the answer you're getting, trust in how the process runs.
More than ever. And
that's kind of, when I talked about business process monitoring, that's part of the sale. You're going to do this really cool track and trace thing that only SAP can supply. You're going to drive BDC. We're going to get all this BDC data, and we're going to run this, and we're going to be able to say, hey, my container's stuck in the Indian Ocean because there's a cyclone coming. I need to press a button and find more supply. And you want to trust that that's the right answer. The business user wants to trust that, and IT gets to sell and deliver that trust. That's a real connection that I think needs to be made. And again, you start that phase 0, you don't start that phase 2.
So I want to challenge both of you guys, but just real quick, I just want to say that one of my frustrations here historically has been that the so-called best business cases I get told about are like, oh, we had a huge mess of legacy spaghetti and we were running 175 SAP systems. So when we went to standard, we saved all this money and stuff. It's like, wait, so you're getting rewarded for cleaning up a big mess. That's not a modern business case. That's just cleaning up past stuff. And a lot of companies that have done that. And now that's not there for them anymore. Like, so, and even if it is there, it's not enough. Like, where's the forward-thinking business result? It's not just saving money. So to put it back to you guys, like in the clean core standardization journey, where's the business case? Give it to me.
Geoff was wagging a finger. Go bag at him.
Clean core is not a business priority. It's an IT priority.
Right. But can it be a business priority? Can it fit in?
I think what has to come back, agility.
You've talked
agility.
About this. Okay.
Right. I would argue to my business counterparts the notion of agility. Clean core as a CIO is my problem. I need to make sure that my shop is doing things in an efficient way. Just the same thing is true for the plant floor manager. He or she needs to make sure that their plants are operating in an efficient way. I'm not going to come up to a CEO and say, hey, I'm going to do this project because my plants are a mess. Back to your point a few minutes ago, right? Well, how did you get it to be a mess to begin with? You should have never gotten it to be a mess.
Exactly.
Right? What I need to argue as a CIO is agility, right? Hey, look, our business dynamics have changed. Our competitors have changed.
And will continue to change.
Yeah. And will continue to change. And in order to remain competitive, here are the steps we need to take with technology. We know we live in a technology-enabled world. Everything is about technology, right? We know that we need to think about AI in the future. We know we need to think about these new models. If we are not innovating along these lines, we are not competitive. That's where I would start. Clean core, Clean core is a how. It's not a why.
And I think one of the things IT gets to do, and as an ally, and I want this allyship to happen because I think that's how we solve this problem. We bring the two sides of passion in. Is if you look at it, again going back to this idea of trust and trust as a service, IT gets to sit in front of the business and say, okay, here's the business process you want. Let me show you where the potential bottlenecks are. You may not understand that if you're doing track and trace, you've got event updates on shipment documentation that you better get right, or you're just going to not know where things are. You're going to have to understand how to track, how to update the tracking. You're going to have to real time logistics connections. I'm going to be there to monitor those bottlenecks. I'm going to create those connections. I'm going to be the guy who makes sure that this stuff gets done. Because you might not, you just want to press a button. Great, press that button, knowing that we got your back. But I need you to be in the room with me to look at the CEO and say, hey, let's get going. And let's get going now.
I did an interview that I'm writing up now with a CIO. It's not an SAP project, but it's the same kind of stuff. And I was pressing him on this topic of how are you justifying your value? And he said to me, my CFO is my happiest customer. And I thought, here's someone who gets it. Here's someone who gets it.
You're only as happy as your CEO? Yeah, is that
your
it?
CFO. I mean, like, CFO, if you're solving your CFO's problems with technology, well, that sounds pretty good to me.
That's one stakeholder.
There's an immense, opportunity here. I think that the AI, the generative AI, the agentic AI, these things have tremendous opportunity. You are not going to unlock that opportunity with legacy systems, right? I've thought about one of my nemesis for my entire CIO career has been the AS400, right? Yeah. This machine that lasted forever. And everywhere
present tense.
It's still there. Man. Oh my God. I used to go, walking. Oh, how many AS400s do we have? And, then my heart would slowly deflate, right? Because I'd be like, oh goodness, right? But, that's not a platform that's going to lend itself to this whole view. Like we spent the first part of our conversation today talking about BDC, right? Talking about a future of AI, semantic layers, right? Zero data copy. These things are not going to be applicable if you're continuing to think that your ECC environment is just good enough, right? That innovation, you're going to be at the tail end of innovation. And everyone who's innovating faster than you is going to get further and further ahead. That's the business case.
Yep.
All right. So
there's the passion. There you go.
Yeah, no, I like this. So I'm going to propose.
I don't know how you translate into a Word doc, but we can try.
Yeah, maybe all caps. I don't think Copilot's going to be able to help us. Anyway, I'll throw in a few things that strike me as useful here. One is this notion of a changing attitude, and we referred to it a minute ago. But in that same interview I was doing, this individual, I asked him a little bit about how he made that happen, and he talked about how a major part of his bandwidth with this CFO relationship, and not just CFOs, but is going into analytics and digitization. He talked about when he looks at anything, there's always the consideration of top or bottom line or contribution to the total pie of business. So he's looking at business problem rather than just technology. So I would propose to you all that part of the solution is a different type of attitude and a mindset shift, right? And to some degree on the business side as well. Business leaders need to have more curiosity about technical solutions and getting under the hood a little more, especially with AI, I would add. So there's attitude, then there's resources, right? And yes, some of the business case resources may be a little static or incomplete, but Josh, around, things like Cloud ALM, I think to some extent it's underutilized information. So to some extent, the resource problem is really, I think, a collective problem that we can solve, Geoff, in collaboration with ASUG and SAP to get the stuff that is available out there more invisible and engaging community members around those resources. So that's number 2. And I think number 3 is sort of access to innovation and different innovation strategies. And I hope we can pick up all 3 topics at Sapphire and ASUG Annual Conference. But what do you think?
I think these are great topics at ASUG Annual Conference and Sapphire, right? I think the BDC is going to, the BDC layer is going to be front and center. I think there's going to be a tremendous amount of conversation about all the stuff we've been talking about.
And it's important conversation. And I think
very important.
I one of the last conversations I had right before quarantine was actually at an executive exchange. I think we're in Scottsdale, and it was an SAP exec from a major tech company. It was a big name, and he came to me and he said, my biggest problem is that I want to sell SAP inside my organization, and all I can do is talk about S/4HANA Cloud. I don't have a bigger story to tell than this technical upgrade. And I think that has stuck with me 5 years later. It's still the story, except I think the resources that you said are now more available. The data's more available. And I want to build these bridges figuratively and literally between IT and business to fix that problem.
So I think the next step is really connecting people more deeply with the resources that are out there and engaging them with dialogue to make sure we really understand their concerns, because we're just kind of riffing on this today based on what we've heard so far, but we really want to hear from you all, and we hope we'll do that in person as well, but also contact us on LinkedIn or whatever. When I think about forward, to me, the sky's the limit a little bit in terms of how this could play out, because I'm a big fan of sort of creative event design formats. So I really like the idea eventually of, at a show like this, like-minded people can sit around a table together and discuss this problem and come away with things they can take back to their projects. Maybe they divide by role. Maybe you have enterprise architects over here. Maybe you have CIOs over here. Maybe there's folks from SAP and ASUG influence programs on the same tables, like talking about how to take this forward. Because to me, we're not doing enough actioning around this. And so hopefully down the road we can do that, because to me, if you can really take that and not just leave with some ideas, but with some real bullet points like, hey, I learned this at this show, like, I think we need to up the ante here, because I think, Geoff, you described the environment really correctly with this whole tariffs thing as just one example of the volatility of today's business climate, and I think we need to raise our game.
Yep. And coming back to your allusion to Sapphire and ASUG Annual Conference, which is now weeks away, not months away. I know it's coming fast, right? So from an ASUG point of view, just to kind of do a magic segue here, 6 pre-conference seminars on the Monday of the week we spend together in Orlando, covering the topics of SAP Business AI, Transformation Management Suite, Signavio, Lean IX, the BTP portfolio, incredibly important, and dedicated sessions for enterprise architects who are now more essential than ever. That's on the Orlando Monday. And then the next 2 days are obviously the co-produced program between SAP and ASUG. ASUG is going back to the 3rd floor this year, the first time in a post-COVID environment. We'll have over 100 sessions on the 3rd floor, which will feel very reminiscent of the pre-COVID Sapphire. And those sessions are going to range from customer stories with real-world experiences. Back are the SAP roadmaps, interactive sections with product experts, as well as, conversations with the three of us where we're going to be recording a podcast. So I think you're going to see, again, more on Signavio, more on Lean IX, more on BTP, more on BDC, Rise, Grow. I'm going to throw all of the acronyms in a very short period of time, which, John, to your point a few minutes ago, I think it's more important than ever for us to come together and have these conversations and learn from each other and listen to each other and determine how do we want to move forward in what is really a vastly more complicated geopolitical climate.
Yep. And by the way, there's going to be a session, I think, on business case.
And a session on business case. I left that for you guys to cover.
So just real quick on the scheduling, you'll have to check like the fine tunes for locations and everything. But on the Tuesday, Josh and I are doing our business case session. We'd love to have you. That's at 2 p.m. That'll be in the amongst
Eastern.
2 p.m. Eastern. That's in the ASUG sessions. And then 4 p.m. on the show floor in the ASUG hub is the Ask Me Anything podcast. This is being built with 3 of us. Gosh, we are really opening ourselves up for it with the Ask Me Anything format there. So I wonder how that's going to go. But I guess we're going to find out soon.
We'll find out.
We did a good job with that when we were in Florida for ASUG Tech Connect. So I think this is an encore performance. Fingers crossed.
That one had a little more structure. This one we could get anything. I don't know
what if we get nothing.
Oh, I don't think that's.
I'm more concerned about the reverse. Josh,
sir,
carry us out. Geoff and I have had a few final comments. Give us the last word on all this.
I think for me, I think this is a really important year for these conferences for a lot of the reasons you just stated. I think we need to gather more together as a community and really exchange ideas. I think there's a lot of decisions that have to be made quickly, and I think we need these kind of forum. I'm really excited about how it's we're going to tell some of these stories. We as a community, as well as obviously SAP. And I think, as we all know, Sapphire and Annual Conference really set the stage for an entire year of decision making, and it sort of starts there in a lot of ways. And so that to me is really the best part of it, is to sort of be on the ground floor of when you see people are planting seeds all around the place, partners and SAP, we are, and to watch how that stuff sprouts and what happens to it, it's going to be really exciting.
All right, let's see how we sprout. Thanks,
Yeah,
guys.
right.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
See you guys
Next time.